So this is Understanding the Bible, part Exodus. I'm Brian. I'm a pastor, husband, father of four, been studying the Bible a long time. And so here's Exodus. So Exodus is the second book in the Bible, and the lineage and foreshadowing of Christ has been established in Genesis. Exodus now is going to explain that God's blessings are not about the individual per se, but they're societal, and the blessings of God are about the community. These blessings are what give structure to a nation as a whole. Now listen carefully. Exodus is about God establishing his identity through a group of people. That's the theme. Now this biblical concept of blessing was lost years ago in American individualism, and evangelicalism lost its bearings when it adopted the idea that biblical Christianity was only and all about an individual going to heaven or hell. That's not what it's about. So books like Exodus are very hard for people who have this mindset to understand it. Now, the Jacob's descendants, also known as Israel, and the Hebrews have been in Egypt for a couple hundred years. These are different names for the same people. They've grown in number quite a bit, and the Egyptian Pharaoh is afraid of them. He enslaves the Hebrews. He institutes a policy of genocide, attempting to kill all the male children being born to the Hebrews. And out of this comes a faithful family within the Jewish people who will have a faithful son named Moses. He's the deliverer of the nation, but not so that he can be the hero. He's the deliverer so he can establish the identity of God through the nation carrying God's blessings. Keep that in mind. Moses is serendipitously raised in the palace of Egypt, but rejects Egyptian culture, choosing his own people who carry the seed of the Messiah. Just a note, Egypt not allow the Hebrews freedom of religion because Egyptians hated shepherds and anything to do with sheep. Egypt's economy was basically about the cows and its cowboys, and there's no shepherds allowed. Moses tells Pharaoh to let the people go so they can worship their God. Pharaoh rejects Moses' offer, and Egypt ends up learning about a side of God that they didn't know existed. This God is a fierce warrior and also the creator who will not fight with guns and swords, but leverages nature as his artillery. So through 9 plagues using nature, Egypt is brought to its knees. And all of these plagues, the state of Goshen, where Israel is untouched. And the Egyptian people are warned over and over about the coming disasters, like get your cattle in, the hail's coming, things like that. The 10th plague is the death of all the firstborn in Egypt. This can be avoided with the death of a lamb, its blood on your doorpost, and you eating that lamb. Remember, this is detestable to the Egyptians. So death passes through Egypt, even to the palace, and Pharaoh loses his firstborn, and the cries of the Egyptians echo throughout the night, and Pharaoh is furious. He demands Israel leave Egypt immediately. This becomes what's called the Passover, since death passed over the homes where the lamb was. It's why Jesus Christ will be called the Lamb of God, and even our Passover in the New Testament. Israel leaves Egypt and begins the march toward Moses' old stomping grounds where he was a shepherd. But Pharaoh has a change of heart. He decides he's going to hunt down Israel and kill them all. He pursues with his armies, and the Hebrews are forced to the coast of the Red Sea. But the same God who brought the natural disasters to Egypt opens a way in the Red Sea. The Jews cross it, but Pharaoh's armies are drowned. Now, Egyptian history is interesting in this. It says the Pharaoh was Thutmose III, whose military campaign came to a screeching halt around 1450 BC. Pharaoh doesn't die in this, but much of his military is decimated. Egyptian history is interesting in that. Israel wanders the wilderness, gets thirsty, complains, and is given a river of water from the Rocky Mountain. They complain about food and are fed with manna and quail. They continue to complain that Moses doesn't know where he's going, and they'd rather go back to slavery in Egypt. Moses goes up to Mount Sinai, receives instructions on how to live as a society and establish the identity of God among each other and in the world. And, these laws deal with medical liability, employer-employee relationships, debt administration, some building codes, medical practices, and others, in case you didn't know. There are about 33 different case studies in the law where discernment is given on how to adjudicate certain matters. For example, don't kill covers accidental manslaughter to premeditated murder, and how do you handle those particular cases? So the nuances are there, and they're all applied in the law. Now, all the rules fell under the broad heading of 10 Commandments, but were based on the idea of loving God with all your heart and loving your neighbor as yourself. So Moses goes out of Israel's sight for about 40 days, and Israel creates their own gods and entertainment around those gods that lead to loose morals and a dirty society. In that time, Israel builds a golden calf, calls it a god, and loses their collective mind. Moses comes off the mountain angry, and the Lord offers basically to wipe out the people and just start over with Moses, but Moses mediates all that. And what follows is a sacrificial system put in place and the centering of the Jewish nation on the presence of their God. The architecture is laid out in royal detail to administrate the presence of a heavenly king via holiness, cleansing, sacrifice, those things. And the understanding of the nation would be that the wages of sin and moral failure is death. The national holidays then were prescribed to celebrate the work of the God of Israel. Day of Atonement, things like that. So Exodus ends with the Israelites completing the tabernacle in the presence of God as a heavenly shepherd, guiding them as they establish the identity of God as a nation to the world as administrators of the Spirit of God. Now, a little note here. So collectively, they're establishing the identity of God as a nation. What happens in the New Testament with Jesus Christ is now the identity of God is going to be wrapped up in an individual. It's not the nation anymore. It's a new covenant. It's the individual in Jesus Christ. That's why Paul would say he's God manifest in the flesh. That's why the Pharisees hated Jesus, saying he's the Son of God. Why? Because he is the identity of God in the flesh. It's no longer about the nation collectively expressing the identity of God. Now the entire expression of God, the image of God, is wrapped up in a man, Jesus Christ. But that's New Testament. This is just Exodus here, so hope it's helpful.